The Arab group in the Middle East is the result of the division of power during the Dark Ages in the 16th to 19th centuries. Anatoly Fomenko, a professor at Moscow State University, and his research team challenge the traditional Western historical narrative. They propose an alternative timeline, suggesting that much of the history attributed to Europe and Christianity actually belongs to other cultures. Fomenko highlights overlooked evidence, such as Arabic inscriptions on artifacts found across Eastern Europe, from Germany to Russia and Ukraine. He also points out that the timeline of Russian kings aligns with the Old Testament, a pattern evident in the histories of England, the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and many other countries. Fomenko argues that history was copied from one country to another with changed names. Following Fomenko's work, various YouTube videos and groups, like the Tartarian groups, emerged, claiming that former empires like Tartaria were the true historical powers, often referred to by Muslims in the Western world as the Caliphate or Islamic Empire. Fomenko further examined artifacts in the Kremlin Museum and found many inscriptions in Quranic Arabic, challenging the view of Russia as a purely Christian nation, especially given its rule over parts of Eastern Europe. The Knights Templar also present a historical anomaly. While official history credits them with sponsoring Gothic-style churches in Northwest Europe, they are said to have had a leader named Muhammad, raising questions about their true identity. Spain's rich Islamic history further complicates the narrative. The world's largest Gothic cathedral in Spain is claimed to be a mosque converted into a church. Fomenko also highlights inconsistencies like the Vienna Cathedral, the center of the Holy Roman Empire, reportedly attacked by Muslim Turks who had Christian crosses on their flag, alongside moons and stars. Another anomaly is the mass printing of books in Renaissance Italy when few people spoke Italian until the 1850s, leading to questions about the intended audience. The Quran, according to the article, presents a different historical timeline that challenges humanity to question the historical narratives perpetuated by official accounts. The book History, Fiction or Science? Chronology Volume 4 by Anatoly Fomenko will point out that there is a high possibility that during the Dark Times, in the 16th to 19th centuries, the Arab group in the areas belonging to the headquarters of the Tartaria Empire gradually lost their political status. Below is an excerpt from the book's introduction. Why Antiquity and Dark Ages were to be invented. The consensual world history was manufactured in Europe in 16-19 centuries with political agenda of powers of that period on the basis of erroneous clerical chronology elaborated by Jesuits Joseph Justus Scaliger and Dionysius Petavius. By middle of 16th century the prime political agenda of Europe that reached superiority in sciences and technologies, but was still inferior militarily to the evil empire of Eurasia, was to free Europe. The concerted effort of European aristocracy, black and white Catholic clergy, Protestants, humanists and scientists in 15th, 17th centuries in creation and dissemination of fictional ancient world served this agenda. The fictional ancient world was created by representing events of 11-16 centuries as ones that happened thousands years before according to the ancient sources they wrote by authorities they invented. The European aristocracy, considerable part of which were fugitives from Byzantine and or the inheritors of Eurasian warlords, supported the myth of ancient world to justify its claims to countries they ruled. The black and white Catholic clergy, Protestants developed and supported the myth of ancient world to justify their claims of being more ancient and to separate themselves from Eurasian orthodoxy in the countries ruled by European aristocracy. The scientists supported the myth of ancient world as safe cover for their heretic research that produced results contrarian to the tenets of Christianity. They justified their discoveries by authorities of ancient scientists they themselves invented and used as pseudonyms. The humanists developed and supported the myth of ancient world as convenient safe haven for their ideas that conflicted with Christianity and aristocracy. They disguised and justified their ideas on authorities of ancient authors of their own making and wrote under their glorious aliases. Why, oh why the mainstream historians do not gratify prominent mathematician Dr. Fomenko with laurels, but call the riot police. For example, the English historians rage at the suggestion that the history of ancient England was de facto a Byzantine import transplanted to the English soil by the fugitive Byzantine nobility. As the sign of recognition of the special role of the English historians who consider themselves the true scribes of world history, the cover of the present book portrays Tintoretto's Jesus Christ crucified on the Big Ben. The Russian historians brand it all as pseudoscience, because Dr. Fomenko asserts that there was no such thing as the Tartar and Mongol invasion followed by over 2 centuries of slavery, providing a formidable body of documental evidence to prove his assertion. Old Tartars and Mongols were the actual ancestors of the modern Russians, living in a trilingual state with Arabic and Turkic spoken as freely as Russian. The ancient Russian state was governed by a double structure of civil and military authorities, and the hordes were actually professional armies with a tradition of lifelong conscription, the recruitment being the so-called blood tax. Their invasions were punitive operations against the regions that attempted tax evasion. Dr. Fomenko proves that official Russian history is a blatant forgery concocted by a host of German scholars brought to Russia by the usurper dynasty of the Romanovs. Their ascension to the throne was the result of conspiracy, so they charged these German imports historians with the noble mission of making Romanov's reign look legitimate. Some comments about the book: history, fiction or science? Chronology Volume 4. Comment 1. Despite the efforts of critics, skeptics and debunkers, this book is gaining popular acceptance very fast. Everyone I know who is interested in history is stunned by the ideas the Fomenko group present. The idea that Genghis Khan was the Turkic/Eastern name of a Russian prince is breathtaking in its implications. Or, the case for Mongolia to have been a corruption of the Greek megalion, or great, representing a horde, or ord/order, the Russian name of its medieval professional horse soldiers, as the historicist's distortion of the Mongol hordes as being of Far Eastern origin instead of being Russian Cossacks. This book is so filled with shocking and exciting ideas about how history has been obfuscated, hidden, and changed to suit the local needs of political factions that it has completely altered my perspective on current world events and the how and why of Central European and Middle Eastern politics. Many modern historians rail against Fomenko's theories because they are both obviously, intuitively accurate and totally opposite established thinking that most history books would have to be completely rewritten. And no one who spent 10 years getting his doctorate in conventional history wants to admit that everything he thinks he knows is just plain wrong. I know it upset me at first, but the long list of explanations, coincidences, facts and inconsistencies listed by Fomenko et al. Can't help but change your perspective. These books are not the usual poorly written, poorly researched imaginative tripe provided by most historical revisionists. This is the work of one of the world's leading mathematicians and other highly educated scholars. In fact, there is so much raw data in this series that even I, who reads constantly, have a hard time moving through it. But the subject matter shakes the very foundations of so many assumptions of modern history that it's worth every bit of effort. Don't let the conventional history proponents convince you these are false. Read them for yourself. If you can read the whole series and still think the history of the world is what you've been taught, then you might be right, and I might be wrong. But I don't think I am. Fomenko is a pioneer, a radical, a free thinker and revolutionary in the field of scientific historical analysis. Comment 2. Very dense. You really have to know your stuff to get through this book. Honestly, if you can read this book and understand it from a math standpoint, well then you are set. History knowledge is no good for this book. Fomenko's whole theory is based on astronomy, the movement of the moon, gravitational forces, gravitational pulls, etc. Fomenko uses mathematics to explain inconsistencies. Know at least something about math and science, enough to understand the fundamental workings of space, well then this book is for you. It is not really for history buffs since they are the first to cry malarkey. Presumably, because they don't get the science behind it. It is not a dig, that's just not the field they are in. Besides, imagine spending your life learning history just to be told you are wrong, doesn't sit well with some people. The book is supposed to be thought-provoking. Fomenko is not claiming he is right in any way. He is presenting patterns and inconsistencies in history that he started studying after trying to compute coefficient d in the theory of lunar motion when he was studying celestial mechanics. He needed the dates of ancient eclipses, for which he used historical documents to figure out. He found a leap in the interval of the 5th to 10th century. That is how this book begins. The guy wrote 7 books about the subject and spent decades researching the topics. There is so much information in this book, that it might take the smartest person years to dig through. So again, if you have an open mind and want to look at history through the math/science lens, then this book is definitely for you. David Ewing Jr.'s take on antiquity and the invented Dark Ages. David Ewing Jr. is the author of many books on the history of Tartaria. His most recent and elaborate book is Tartaria, Secrets of Kabbalah. I have watched some of David Ewing Jr.'s videos about the secrets of Kabbalah, and the content is closely related to several views as follows. The Bible is a work of fiction. Arabic and its letters are the mother of Latin and European languages. The Quran is many times more reliable than official histories. The numbers 33, 19, and 666 are codes associated with the phenomenon. These are decoded in his book, which serves as a testament to a pre-programmed totalitarian world. They have manipulated the course of history based on a conspiracy. This plot is calculated by a mathematical setting tied to the current Western calendar. Some comments from David Ewing Jr. In general reference to the idea of the manipulation of history, I'm sure you have heard of the so-called Mandela effect. This is where the number 19 comes in. Why are they using that number? Because it represents a word and a name. The number 19 represents the Alpha and the Omega, as explained in my book. They're using this because the name of God has power. The Alpha and the Omega represents the name of God. That's why they're incorporating 19 everywhere, as they know it has a creative effect and impacts how people think. Now, let's address the manipulation of languages and scripts. Many people discuss the Kabbalah and various scripts without considering that the word Kaaba is being associated with Hebrew. However, ancient Hebrew is elusive, and most Jewish books from a few centuries ago are written in a handwriting that is identical to Arabic. This writing is often termed as cursive Hebrew, sultry Hebrew, or pseudo-script. I've studied the Hebrew and Arabic alphabets since the age of 15 and found that these scripts are simply different handwritings. The same can be said for Sanskrit, which appears to be Arabic with added lines. Anatoly Fomenko shows that the development of Mandarin is questionable, suggesting it's not a language that has existed for thousands of years in China. The Mongolian script is said to have influenced Mandarin, but the evidence is shaky at best. When we consider Roman languages, the origin of the word vaccine is often attributed to the Latin word vacca. Still, there's no definitive proof that it's Latin. The word vacca also exists in Arabic. This confusion raises questions about the origins of Latin, Arabic, and Hebrew and their relation to each other. The global aspect of this civilization leads to further evidence. For instance, the Mayan language is sometimes linked to Hebrew or the lost tribes of Israel. But upon closer inspection, the Mayan language appears more related to Arabic. Arab historically referred to educated people, teachers, professors, or masters. It did not denote a race. Today, we've been led to believe that Arabic and Hebrew are distinct languages. This distinction has been used to create a divide, misleading people about the origins and relationships between languages. The purpose of discovering the secret of Kabbalah is also the intention to lay a solid foundation to discover the two things that Anatoly Fomenko was looking for: antiquity and dark ages were to be invented. And that is also one of the purposes of finding the truth about Tartaria. The Quran, often perceived merely as a religious text, holds within its verses a multitude of messages that extend beyond spiritual guidance. Contrary to the misconceptions that it primarily promotes conversion or a singular religious worldview, the Quran actually encourages its followers to respect and learn from the teachings of other holy scriptures, such as the Bible and the Torah. It underscores the significance of making righteous choices in life, suggesting that life is a continuum of decisions that will be evaluated in the afterlife. Rather than portraying God as an intimidating entity, the Quran presents him as a benevolent force that advocates for good deeds. The narrative of Cain and Abel, a tale shared across the Old Testament, the Quran, and the Torah, offers another profound insight. Here, Satan is depicted not as a direct perpetrator of harm but as an instigator who influences individuals to make destructive choices. This narrative aligns with historical events, such as the Inquisition, where humans, not supernatural entities, were responsible for persecution and violence, and they will be held accountable for their actions. The Quran offers believers a sense of security, asserting that with unwavering faith, they need not fear even death. It goes to the extent of suggesting that a person's strong faith can render even poison harmless, emphasizing the brain's potential to influence the immune system. While discussing the Quran, it is imperative to differentiate between analyzing its content and endorsing Islam. Despite its resistance to the prevailing world order and its emphasis on the worship of one God, the Quran does not elevate Prophet Muhammad above other prophets or human beings. Instead, it fosters critical thinking and skepticism towards established systems, posing a potential threat to the current global order. A contentious issue in historical scholarship revolves around the reliance on ancient Sanskrit documents, many of which were acquired by European powers like Portugal, Spain, England, and France. The problematic aspect arises when these documents are used to authenticate historical claims, even though they were procured from native Indians who believed they could no longer decipher their ancestral language. Further inconsistencies emerge when examining supposed translations from Sanskrit to Greek inscriptions on monuments. For instance, historical photographs of Ephesus reveal no evidence of the ancient ruins that purportedly contain these inscriptions. Similarly, in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, local testimonies contradict the officially recognized chronology of reconstructed ancient ruins. Egypt's pyramids, often considered ancient marvels, are also subject to debate. Local documents suggest these structures were built relatively recently, challenging the widely accepted belief in their ancient origins. In the 1960s, the United States witnessed significant protests against the Vietnam War, but the followers of the Quran have consistently remained a formidable force, addressing contemporary issues such as dietary restrictions and skepticism towards mainstream narratives, notably during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Quran transcends its religious boundaries to become a political text as well. While its religious content focuses on faith in God and the afterlife, its political aspects cover a broad spectrum of topics. The Quran contains stories not found in the Bible, such as the tale of Gog, Magog, and Alexander the Great building a separating wall, suggesting that some historical figures and events may have originated from the Quran. The prevailing historical narrative in the West, which is also taught in many Eastern countries, diverges significantly from the history presented in the Middle East. While China and India, for instance, largely align their histories with the Western timeline, the Middle East presents a contrasting narrative. Anatoly Fomenko, a professor at Moscow State University, and his research team have challenged this mainstream historical narrative. They proposed an alternative timeline, arguing that much of the history attributed to European and Christian origins actually belongs to other cultures. Fomenko highlights that a majority of artifacts in Eastern Europe bear Arabic inscriptions, a fact largely overlooked by mainstream historians. He also draws parallels between the timeline of Russian kings and the Old Testament, which is evident in the histories of England, the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and many other nations. The Knights Templar present another historical anomaly. While official history claims they financed the construction of Gothic churches in northwestern Europe, they were also purported to have had a leader named Muhammad, raising questions about their true identity. Spain's rich Islamic history further complicates the narrative of Gothic cathedrals. The largest Gothic cathedral in the world, located in Spain, was allegedly a mosque converted into a church. Fomenko also highlighted discrepancies in the narrative surrounding Vienna Cathedral, the heart of the Holy Roman Empire, which was allegedly attacked by Muslim Turks. These Turks, however, bore Christian crosses on their flags, along with moons and stars. Despite the mass printing of books in Renaissance Italy, very few people spoke Italian until the 1850s, prompting questions about the intended audience for these publications. It presents an alternative historical timeline that challenges mainstream narratives and encourages humanity to question the historical inaccuracies perpetuated by the established order. Many researchers, including Michelle Gibson, discuss the Moorish Empire and the potential role of black-skinned people as civilization builders, possibly the true native populations supplanted by modern societies. History is a multifaceted tapestry with competing narratives. As Anatoly Fomenko and others have demonstrated, mainstream historical accounts can be deeply flawed and influenced by political and cultural biases. The Quran, with its comprehensive worldview, offers a different perspective on history, urging us to question established narratives and seek a deeper understanding of the complexities of human civilization.